She's an Australian media personality, a journalist and a prolific blogger. She's author of I Quit Sugar and has a large internet following and presence. So thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, you can use that if you want to look around.
Spacebar's good. Everyone can hear me, can't they? Yeah? Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you everyone for having me here. I'm a N=1 experimental blogger. I'm one of those. And I don't know how you started your day today. I was at a really cute little bed and breakfast in town, and there's only 2 other rooms apart from the one I'm in, and the 50-plus, slightly overweight snorer in the room next to me sat down and decided, as most 50-year-old, slightly overweight men like to do with me, is tell me all about their health regime and how they stay healthy and what they eat. And that basically consisted of a whole heap of sugar, basically, and a whole heap of carbs. And I was sitting there eating bacon and eggs, and I think he was just trying to justify himself or something. I don't know really what the motivation is, but as it turns out, he's in town because he's a sugar importer. And I thought that was wonderful irony. The guy who ran the bed and breakfast almost snorted out his cup of tea. It was very funny. Anyway, I've spoken at one of these events before in Melbourne, and sorry, it was Sydney. It was Sydney, wasn't it? Sydney. Yeah, Sydney. And I spoke about the connection between thyroid disease, or specifically Hashimoto's, and sugar. I actually came to this kind of realm via my thyroid. I've got Hashimoto's, and this is around about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. I got very, very unwell. And I shared that story at the time. It's why I quit sugar. I gave it a go. I gave it an experiment. I experimented. I shared my experiences in a series of blogs and a column for Sunday Life magazine. The Australians might know of that magazine. And I just kept going and going and going. Now, that was January 2011. It turned into an ebook. I decided to put it out as an ebook. It sold a few more than I expected, and then a publisher came knocking, and it came out as a print book, and it turned out to be the #1 non-fiction title in Australia last year, and it's now #2 in the UK and about to come out in the US. Meantime, on Monday, my next book, I Quit Sugar ... for Life, is out both here in New Zealand and Australia. And it's provided a really wonderful opportunity for me, because this book is what I'm all about and what I think a lot of the people in this room are all about. It's a next chapter, but essentially it's kind of... I've been given a licence now to say what I want. I've hit the mainstream. I am able to go on mainstream television. I shared in the conference yesterday that when the first book came out, I did 83 press interviews in 3.5 weeks. For the first book, and just being a media personality means that I'm allowed to sort of have that stage. I have that stage still, and I'm hoping I can share a couple of messages. My messages in this next book are slightly different, and it's about taking the low-carb, sugar-free message in slightly new directions, in part because I think it's responsible, and in part because it's actually what the public want to hear. I've had a couple of years now to work out, via my online interactions. I interact with, and my team now, I've got a team of 11 who work with me. We have around about 833,000 visits per day across my various platforms. And we get to interact, we get to see, and we have data that backs it up, what people are wanting to hear, how they're wanting to hear it, what messages they're responding to. So I get a very good real-time gauge of where people are at and what they want to hear. And Grant, some of the points you raised in your talk I think are very, very valid. But to move on, I just want to cover off, I guess, a number of points that I believe, I guess, where I'm taking the message and where I think, some of you in this room who are communicators in this realm might find beneficial. It's about sustainability and being sensible. That is actually a picture in my... Actually, I don't think that picture made it into my next book, but... I'm very much now about trying to press home to people how it's not necessarily about sugar-free and about restriction. It is about other messages, and we can tell this story through, I guess, less scary phenomenon. I'm very mainstream, and I applaud everybody out there pushing the low carb or even zero carb message. I think it's fantastic, and I resonate with it personally. However, I speak to the mums and dads out in the suburbs, and think of the furthest suburb, I go further. My biggest seller is Big W. A quarter of my books are sold through Big W in Australia. Do you have something similar to that here? Do you have Big W in New Zealand?
No, we don't have it,
but you know what it is.
We
Sustainability is really cutting through with people. I don't talk about being paleo. I don't talk about being vegan because I'm not vegan. A lot of people think I am vegan for some reason. It's really strange. But ironically, Mark Sissons from Primal Blueprint, his wife is currently doing my 8-week program. I'm very much associated with those realms, but I personally distance myself from them because I do think it alienates. I talk instead in this new book and in my communications with media about sustainability for the planet and about economics, also about time and effort, but also about being able to stick to this kind of way of eating. It's about not eating processed foods. Now, when I go out to media, I try to downplay the whole anti-sugar thing. I don't like talking in negatives, I like talking in positives. So I basically talk about how when you don't eat sugar, it's essentially just cutting out all the crap. It's as simple as that. And even the biggest skeptics kind of respond to that. One of the other messages I work with is about going back to the way that our grandparents and our great-grandparents used to eat before the crap and before the onset of these metabolic diseases. And that cuts through. These are really simple messages that people do tend to respond to. It's about maximising nutrition. Again, this is about being positive and talking in the positive. Negative messages just don't cut through. I don't need to tell any of you here that most of the Western world is nutrient deficient. I think 9 out of 10 Americans are deficient in potassium, 8 out of 10 deficient in vitamin E, and on it goes. And one of the things that I find works really well, I tend not to talk about how carbs are nutrient negligent or negligible. I focus instead on just talking about dense nutrition. So these are all my Instagram photos. We had a really great chat last night about, why am I on Instagram? What do I think of social media? Well, I'm one of those painful people that takes photographs of my meals, and you'll notice that I have 2 bowls to my name, and that's actually literally quite right. I got that top one for my 21st, and it pretty much sustains me. But I just share with people how I get huge amounts of greenery into my diet, supplemented with meat and fat, and I tell that story over and over and over and over and over again, and people start to get the picture. So I focus on that. When I put together the menu, I've got a set of menus for this second book and also for my 8-week program. I got dietitians because everybody wants a dietitian to look at these things, and that's great. I got several dietitians to look at my program, and at a very bare minimum, it was 150% over the micronutrient ratio for at least some of the micronutrients going on there, up to 500% on top of the recommended daily recommended intake for some of these micronutrients. What I don't tell people is that it's actually quite a high fat, saturated fat program. I don't need to tell them that. It's just in there. The food looks great. And gradually they absorb these messages as they're ready. What I do tell them is it's nutrient dense. I can then start bringing in some of those messages about saturated fat, how vitamins A, E, K and D require saturated fat to be properly absorbed. I then tell my story about how I spent a lot of time working with the Blue Zone team with National Geographic in Icaria and Sardinia, looking at their diets there. And what do you know? They douse their vegetables in saturated fat at every meal. So it's also about reducing the toxic load. And this goes back to the question that I get asked a lot, and especially at a function like, or an occasion like this, is, what's my take on carbs? Am I low carb? Am I zero carb? Am I anti-carb? Well, again, I prefer to answer it in terms of, if you would like to go without try going out without carbs. Give it a crack for a good couple of weeks and see how it works for you. However, my cookbook does happen to be very, very low carb. Here's a pizza made with cauliflower. I make it look as sexy as possible. That picture's probably not doing it a great deal of justice, but it looks better when you pan back. You've got the framing of the accoutrements on the page. But I basically, the book is essentially very, very low carb. There's very few carbs in there, but I don't bang on about it. And I address the issue of going low carb by saying to people, well, we're all about dense nutrition and we're all about minimising the toxic load. And, and I share with people why some carbs are problematic from that point of view. Granted, my audience is very mainstream and I'm not working at the level that many of you in this room are working at in terms of people who are already sick. But, in terms of speaking to the main, these kind of messages are really starting, I feel, to cut through. It's about getting us all cooking again. And this is a Michael Pollan quote from his book Cooked, which I particularly like. And he makes the argument that when we feel disempowered by the processed food industry, the best thing we can do to sort of, stick it up them and retaliate is to start cooking. And I totally agree. And when I talk to media about this phenomenon, they kind of go, yeah, you're right. Mind you, most people actually really balk at the idea of cooking, but they like the fact that we should all be encouraging other people to cook. Having said that, on the latest 8-week program, and I should just say that I've got books that I sell. I'm just declaring it here. I sell books, and I also sell an online program that people can do where their hands are held through the whole process day by day. They're told exactly what they need to do to get off sugar. It's menu plans, shopping lists, the whole thing. This second round, I'm just pushing things a little bit further, and they're making fermented cucumbers in week 2 using whey. And I noticed that I think Sally Fallon's book's out there, a big whey proponent. They make their own whey, they make their own cream cheese, and the discussion on the forums is so enthusiastic. These are people who could barely cook toast, and they're spending their weekend making fermented cucumbers, and people are loving it. You only have to check out Instagram, their photos, and if I get a few people cooking in this way, then I can retire as far as I'm concerned. It's about saving time and money, and I brought this point up yesterday when I was speaking. Michael Pollan did an experiment again in his book Cooked, where he timed his family as they cooked a series of microwave meals for the family, compared with him cooking, I can't remember exactly what meal it was. And it was much faster for him to actually prepare a meal from scratch using whole food than using microwave meals. Lustig does a similar experiment in his new cookbook, which I think comes out in a couple of weeks here. He and his team, his co-author, devise a meal that costs $6.40 and it feeds 4 people. And here what I've done is I actually show people and then I challenge them to do it themselves, where you start with one of my recipes and then you do a choose your own adventure. You remember those things as a kid where you'd have to kind of go down these paths and choose your own adventure and see how many meals you can create from the one base meal, generally using a slow cooker. That's one of the other principles I introduce to people in this book, is that old school crock pot, slow cooking techniques, because it's cheap, it's easy, it's dense nutrition because we're cooking at low temperatures, preserving enzymes, and you can avoid sugar. So here we take one roast chook, which you cook over, you then take the bones, make a broth, you can then use the leftovers to make a pie, then a soup, and then so on and so forth, around it goes, and it ends up creating 14 meals out of one chook. One of the other messages I share is, in this realm of being sensible, a sensible, reasonable voice in all of this, is what things to buy organic and which ones you can kind of get away with, because not everyone can afford organic. Not everyone has access to organic produce. But one of the things I really advocate is chicken. Chicken really needs to be bought organic and free range. And so that's why I focus on chicken here, to show that you can actually get it to stretch in many directions and it's not that expensive in the end. It's about ditching diets. I spend a whole chapter going through all the very popular diets, pulling out the bits that have actually got some scientific backing and make intuitive sense, and applying them through my recipes. I'm really against the whole green juicing fad, in part because of the sheer wastage of fibre that's chucked out, when people do this kind of stuff. Instead, I suggest people make green smoothies where they blend up their vegetables and make sure that they add fat in there. Green juices, you can't really do that. Green smoothies, you can add coconut oil, you can add, almond milk, coconut products in there. So, that's part of the messaging as well. It's about being really, really, really sensible. And I think there's an opportunity for us all here to be the sensible voices in this whole kind of realm. And, there are so many competing dietary messages out there. So many people don't know what to do, and I get exposed to just how clueless people are about food via the information, the questions I get asked over and over again. I mentioned yesterday, one of the questions I get asked is, can I drink wine? Is freshly squeezed, but I drink freshly squeezed juice. That's fine, isn't it? I've been asked that question 65,000 times on my blog. That's not an exaggeration, that's actually a hard fact. And people just don't seem to get it. It's and the other one that David Gillespie, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, he and I are constantly asked is, sugar's natural, or, and it's like, well, his response has always been, well, so is arsenic and petroleum. It doesn't mean you're meant to eat it. So I'm very much about speaking to being very sensible, talking about what to buy organic, making it easier for people to actually absorb these messages in a very practical way. Oh, sorry, there we go. There was something else coming up. These are some of the things that I talk about in my book. Processed foods contain extra calories. A recent study found, and you can read it for yourselves, I think you're all probably familiar with this concept, which debunks the whole calories in, calories out argument. But it also points to, I use that quote because it really points to the difference between whole food, a very familiar whole food, basically a cheese sandwich. I'm not going to start talking about chia seed overnight parfaits because that doesn't mean that much to somebody living out in the, way out in the suburbs. I talk about a cheese sandwich and compare it with just a processed version of it, and you can see what goes on there. Okay, it's transportable. That's actually my kitchen window. It's one of my Instagram photos of what I do with my little Ziploc bags. I wash them, turn them inside out and dry them, and I've discovered this great way to dry Ziploc bags. Is you just stick them to the window and they dry in minutes. There's none of this hanging, they're really quite awkward things to dry on a rack. So I tell you, people loved this. They really loved it. They might not all do it, but they really love these kind of tips. And so I make my slow-cooked food, put it in these things, freeze them, then take them to the office. They're ready. They start to thaw out. And, yep, I use a microwave. But if a microwave is what gets people cooking, you know what? I'm totally fine with it. It's the lesser of evils. So essentially, I've used my messaging. I've used the low-carb, no sugar or low sugar message to really transport messaging into new realms. Some of those are food wastage. That's one of my big campaigns at the moment, and it's fantastic. I've got a whole chapter on leftovers, and there's this seamless way of cooking using all your little bits and pieces. Leftover wine, people say, who's got leftover wine? But mixed with your leftover herbs, in particular meats. I'm sure many of you come up against this idea that a grain-based diet is more sustainable and more ethical than a meat inclusive diet. Well, it's actually bollocks, especially in New Zealand and Australia, and I use my platform to explain that to people. I explain that it's about health instead of dieting, and that's something that people are really starting to get. They want sustained health, not necessarily just to lose weight. I promote slow cooking through all of this. I promote freezing. A full freezer works more economically than a half-full freezer. So I'm all about having staple, no-sugar ingredients, non-processed ingredients. So par-cooking your vegetables when you go to the market so that they don't waste. You par-cook your broccoli all in one go. You have it there, and then you're ready to cook your unprocessed, sugar-free meal throughout the week. Exercise and morning routines are a really big thing as well. I take some of my messaging to explain we need to be gentle with our exercising, although I have to confess that some of the people in this room that this morning saw me bolting from the park back to my bed and breakfast this morning. And I promote not running, but I had to run this morning to get back in time. So I think there's a whole range of opportunities where the messaging can be shifted slightly to take us further, to make it more palatable, and to penetrate the mainstream in new ways. And I very much feel that some of the things I've just covered are what the public is ready for and what the media is ready for. This is what somebody, I should actually confess, I got convinced to put in this slide because I also promote cycling. I shouldn't be promoting cycling while listening to your to music, perhaps. But the fact that I'm wearing what I want to wear. I cycle in heels. I just get on with it, and I think this kind of seamless way of living, of incorporating a whole range of important health messages, is very, very important. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I will extend the invitation. I did the same yesterday. I do have a platform. I'm very, very privileged. I don't know quite how I've landed in this position where I am able to reach out to people. And I do like to be able to support people doing great stuff. If you're doing, projects academically or in health advocacy or whatever it might be, and you do need to reach out and you do want some support, I am always available as I can be to share, to support you reaching out to my demographic if it's an appropriate message. So I can be contacted via these outlets, and please do reach out. Any questions?
So yeah, I love that message of being kind of defined by what you do rather than what you don't do, and trying to push that. We got some questions?
Obviously, quitting sugar was the starting point, but you seem to have gone on some way more, make it much bigger than that. Have you, obviously, quitting sugar is the brand now, but are you looking at changing into sort of more of a general approach?
Yeah, in terms of branding, do you mean?
Yeah, just so it makes it more...
Like I quit commercialised living or something. I guess I actually regret in many ways having such a negative title to what I do. I quit sugar. It's kind of, but it just started out that way as a blog post. My first blog post on this was called "I Quit Sugar" because that's what I'd just done, and it sort of took over. Yes, I will be. Part of the reason I have a team now who work with me is to free me up to go and work on projects that really, really matter to me. I mean, the sugar message, yes, absolutely matters to me, but I'm now moving on to sustainability and food wastage. That's my project for the next kind of year to 2 years, because that's what's really, really close to my heart.
I mean, I probably haven't bought your book because I've seen it in the shop, but I've already quit sugar, so I just need that message. But now that I know that it's so much
I'll go and
more
borrow it from a library.
there's so much more to it, though.
Just one more.
There is, and the recipes would probably interest you. Yeah. Hi.
Sarah, with your thyroid issues that got you on this path, do you still now monitor your thyroid levels now that you're actually going low carb? Because sort of some reading of seems indicating that people that have thyroid issues actually if they go too low,
Yeah.
their thyroid's actually turning off.
You might have heard of a book. I don't know if it reached here, called "Don't Quit Sugar." No, Don't Quit Sugar. The author Cassie did my program, and she had thyroid complications, and landed in that. But she went so hardcore. She quit everything. She didn't eat sweet potatoes. She didn't, the whole thing. And she's a dietitian, I think, or nutritionist. And my response is she should probably know better. If you start to notice that your hair's falling out and your thyroid levels are going all over the place, maybe back off. But and do a bit of your own research. Yes, I have found that I've had to experiment with that a little bit, and in fact I've upped some of my carbs just recently. This is probably sharing a little bit too much. I went without my period for 5 years, and I mean, it's critical for anyone with Hashimoto's, and it was kind of my little litmus test. You know, I needed to get my period back before I reached 40, and I did. I got it back 4 months ago. So. But I have to admit, I did just increase my carbs just a little. I'm talking sweet potatoes, that kind of thing. Yeah, I quite enjoyed doing it, I've got to say, and that did help. But to be honest, it's been the sustained sugar-free living, dense nutrition stuff that I've done that has gradually changed my bloods, and I'm now on 25 micrograms of thyroxine, coming down from 200 micrograms. My markers are all in a great space. I have to use a Nora Gedgaudas line, I have to modulate constantly, and I will, I suspect, for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.